This is a special podcast presentation from 700WLW.com. This is Doc Thompson On Demand.
Horribly out of shape. Ran down the hall to the printer, which is, about 500 feet from here? Man. Anyway, Darryl Parks filling in for Doc Thompson today here on the big one, 700 WLW at 6 minutes after 9 o'clock. Now, the protests you've been reading about and seeing on TV started about 18 days ago on September 17th. And the phrase that is given to the protesters in New York City is Occupy Wall Street. However, these protests and these, for lack of a better way of putting it, occupations are taking place in cities all across America, Chicago, Los Angeles, Denver, to name a few, Boston, and also coming this weekend. A Occupy Cincinnati movement is taking place on Saturday, and in fact at 11 o'clock Saturday morning, and the march goes from Sawyer Point to Fountain Square, and the local organizer, Nathan Lane, joins us. Nathan, good morning.
Morning. How you doing?
Not bad. So are you from the Cincinnati area?
Yes, I am. Born and raised.
All right, and go to school?
No, actually, at the present time, I'm a journeyman electrician. I'm 35 years old. I've got a 9-year-old daughter myself.
All right. So what got you involved in this here as far as organizing a local Occupy Cincinnati?
Well, to be clear, first off, I'm not the leader of this movement. There is no real leader, but I am pretty active in the organization. I've been following the activities in New York pretty much from the beginning, and it's been pretty inspiring. And when I found other like-minded individuals in the city who were interested in replicating the efforts here in town, we went to work.
Mm-hmm. How did you go about organizing this?
Various methods: Facebook, Twitter, flyers, word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty much any of your traditional means combined with some new media.
Yeah, I checked your Facebook page yesterday, and you had, about 2,100 followers?
I think it's up to about 2,400 now.
Okay.
Yes.
And how many people are you expecting this Saturday?
Well, to be honest, it's been growing by leaps and bounds. We've got, I think, 230 to 240 on the Facebook event page alone. And that's not counting anybody who may have found out about the event through word of mouth or through flyers. So I could easily see a couple hundred.
Mm-hmm. And marching from, as I said, Sawyer Point to Fountain Square. And I know as of last night, you still didn't have a permit for Fountain Square. No,
we're in the process. Our legal team is working on that.
Uh-huh.
At a worst-case scenario, the sidewalk is our property. It's the public's property. And we have every right within our bounds of law to march around the sidewalk. So we're still intent on conducting a protest of some magnitude. Whether or not we're on the square itself or just surrounding the square is an issue to be determined.
Yeah. Now, in the Occupy Wall Street, and just things I have read, interviews I have seen on TV and the various news channels, or on network news or whatever. The goal is often asked, but the goal seems to be rather nebulous. What's your goal here locally?
Well, honestly, I think that's probably an accurate description of the movement. It's just a general sense that the system as it is presently is not working for the vast majority of the population, or as we like to refer to them as the 99%. The number of homeowners that are underwater on their mortgages, not seeing any assistance from the banking industry, they got bailed out and we got left behind. Mm-hmm. I think in the long run, the goals will be determined as we move forward with the protest, as we have time to actually talk with one another and determine what those goals are. But we used to see undue corporate influence over the entire process, be it political or in our daily lives, and we need to see some change.
You mentioned the homeowners, and do you personally, or even with the organization, find that people that are underwater, they have some responsibility in this? They have responsibility in their situation.
I won't deny that fact.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But we just see a system in the present form in which the typical citizen has not seen their needs and their rights represented in the decisions by the policymakers or by the heads of the corporations of this nation.
So your viewpoint is it's up to the government to make someone's life easier?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I think that would be an unfair characterization.
All right. As far as corporations, do you advocate corporations and government getting closer and
No.
having more government regulation over corporations?
Not necessarily, but I do believe that we have a situation at the present time where corporate America and certain segments of our government are a little bit too cozy, and decisions are made in the benefit of corporations and not necessarily for the benefit of the average citizen of this nation.
So when it came out the news that that General Electric, who has a CEO who is from the Cincinnati area, paid no corporate taxes last year, that was offensive to you and your organization.
I don't know if offensive is the proper term.
Well, I'll tell you it was offensive to me.
Well, it may be a very fair assessment, but personally I just feel that that's a situation that needs to be addressed, and it's not being addressed in the present form. There are a large majority of corporations that are based here out of Cincinnati, and we have a very favorable tax code, and that's why they base their operations here. That is not necessarily translated into actual employment or jobs on the ground. They can just base their operations here and report their profits here and not pay taxes on the scale that they would in other jurisdictions. So there are repercussions.
Yeah. Do you favor things like a flat tax?
Me personally?
Yeah, you personally, or the organization. I mean, the organization. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah,
is new.
I honestly can't speak for the organization at this point because we had an organizational meeting on Sunday, and one of the things that was very apparent at that meeting is how many different walks of life are represented and how many different political persuasions were present. We had Ron Paul supporters, former Tea Party members. We have very liberal members there. We had socialists in attendance. We had Republicans, Democrats. People in general are viewing this protest and this movement as an apolitical process and one that needs to be worked through. If you actually monitor what's going on the ground in New York City, aside from the protests and the marches or any arrests that have occurred, if you actually view what is occurring on the ground, you see true democracy in action, true grassroots, people sitting down, discussing, and working through the problems. And they see these problems in our nation that are not being addressed by our politicians, and they're not being addressed by the corporations. And we feel that there's coming to a point where we need to make a change in the way that the system works. And it's people across the spectrum politically. So I can't really honestly speak for anybody else in the group in terms of the flat tax. I think the issues we're facing are much more complex than just what a tax rate is.
All right, let me go back to a question I asked. I mean, do you see that that government needs more regulation on companies?
I don't know if that's even necessarily the right term. I almost feel to a certain degree that regulation in its present form is many times twisted to serve the agenda of individual corporations, and it may not be. I don't believe we have a true free market system any longer. The system is distorted. There are corporations that basically purchase their vote in Congress to favor their own particular interests, which do not necessarily serve those of the market as a whole or the citizens of the nation as a whole.
What is the ultimate? We're running out of time here, and I know you have to leave at 9:15. Quickly, what is the ultimate goal of the Occupy Insert City name here? Occupy Cincinnati, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy LA, or whatever.
Our primary goal here in Cincinnati is first and foremost to stand in solidarity with the protests that are occurring in Washington, D.C., and in New York, and in Chicago, and in Boston. All the other cities around the country, and these protests are going on. Beyond that, I believe a large amount of what we stand for and what we want to see happen, it's going to be worked out in the coming weeks. I think there's going to be a lot of talk among everybody involved with all the protests, but ultimately we see the need for a fundamental change in the way that business is done at the present time.
Will there be an Occupy? Will you be occupying an area here in Cincinnati?
You know, that's a good question. I honestly cannot give an answer to that because I believe the group is yet to decide that. I think there are some people that are very inclined to do that, but a set location has not been determined or picked. We're trying to follow the law. So that's all I can say at that point. There are obviously people within the group that have their own plans, and it remains to be seen what will occur. Yeah. But just stay tuned, and you'll find out.
All right, Nathan, I know you got to run, but I appreciate the time.
Yep.
All right, take care. Nathan Lane.
Take care. Have a good day.
Okay, you too. Nathan Lane, who is the organizer and also spokesperson for the protest, the whatever, coming up on Saturday, the march from Sawyer Point to Fountain Square, and as Nathan said there, they still don't have a permit to head and have their rally, so to speak, on Fountain Square. You know, one of the interesting things about this is, as you know, I use the term nebulous in that interview, and it's like, what are the ultimate goals? There have been characterizations of this organization, which is, for lack of a better way of putting it, the Tea Party of the left. And there's the big difference here, from what I can see, is that nebulous goal, which is what are you trying to achieve? And then you've heard other people that happen to be spokespersons for, and granted, this is a rather new organization and a rather new new gathering, but you have to have a goal, and I understand having having something ingrained and saying that something is wrong. And look at the base level of this. Whether it's the people that are disenfranchised on the right or the people that are disenfranchised on the left, there may be different viewpoints, but the problem ends up being the same. I for one, and to a point that Nathan brought up there, I for one, when you look at the banking industry, and when you look at mortgages being underwater and homes being foreclosed upon, is there culpability in the banks? Yeah, there's culpability. But at the end of it all, the ultimate responsibility is the person sitting there and signing the mortgage. Going out and buying a home worth $400,000 when you make $50,000 a year in the household doesn't make any sense. So there has to be, you're in tough straits right now. Yeah, you were sold a bill of goods that the house was going to increase in value, but then there were also people that were using their houses as banks and taking out those second and third loans on those houses. Yeah, got to have a reason. I mean, if you go back, and there's also been comparisons back to the hippie movement of the 1960s, and look, and that was way before my time. I was only a kid, but there were protests against, it really wasn't a hippie. I mean, there were three different organizations. There were civil rights, there was anti-war, and then of course the hippie movement. But I mean, it was a clear goal as far as what the anti-war movement was back then. It was a clear goal as to what the civil rights movement was at that time, and then the hippie movement was just about smoking pot. But I digress. 18 after 9 on the big one, 700 WL. Doc Thompson back tomorrow. I'm Darryl Parks. 700 WLW and the Fox 19 Storm Tracker forecast. Frank Marzullo saying sunny today and warmer with a high of 73. Clear tonight, 47. Tomorrow, even warmer and sunny. Looking at a high of around 76. Not bad weather. 51, 700 WLW. And this morning, awesome. I left the house about 5:20 or so. And it was awesome, the sky. I mean, just bright star. It's a sky, a star-filled sky you only see this time of the year when it's a little bit cooler, and it's in the fall. I mean, just an awesome stargazing opportunity earlier this morning. All right, back to Nathan. Here's the deal. If you're going to protest, and I made the crack yesterday, and I with one of the guests I had, I said, if they were organized, they would have started protesting back in May. And the reason you start protesting back in May, very simple. It's getting cold. And what something like this is going to show is the resolve of individuals to their cause. I'm joking about it, but there's a lot of truth in that. As the weather gets colder, and think about it, over the weekend, temperature dipped down, Sunday morning, temperature dipped down into the upper 30s. That's cold. That's cold after spending 4 months when it's 85, 90 degrees. Lows at night are 75. So the grassroots effort started in September, about 18 days ago in New York City, and now it's spreading. Issue number 2 is you got to have a goal. And I appreciate Nathan coming on, but I was talking to the producer here during the break, and I said, man, he was like a fish. Couldn't grab a hold of him. What is the ultimate goal? I believe we all know that things are whacked. Things in the economy aren't good. Things in the economy are no longer what we thought, what the norms were. So things are changing, and you know, it's like even when you talk to people that work in the financial industry, and people that make their living trading stocks and managing people's money. You say, well, wait a minute, this report came out, and normally what that would show is an increase in the stock market, but it shows a decrease. And then when bad news comes out, the stock market goes up instead of down. And the normals are all whack now. You know, I've spent a lot of time, Nathan Bacharach of Simply Money. He and I have talked, and also his partner Ed. And I was like, wait a minute. The jobs report is supposed to make the stock market go lower, and it's going higher. What's up with that? No, I don't know. The rules have changed over the last couple of years. One of the things that has been talked about, Nathan Lane there wouldn't commit to it, but I've also heard where the protesters or the occupiers, so to speak, in New York, they are wanting more government regulation on Wall Street firms. Well, you see what ends up happening with that? And this is where it's short-sighted. You just simply have to think it through. Goldman Sachs, big company. I brought up General Electric, big company. Procter & Gamble, big company. You can go right down the list of these big companies. But the problem being the employers that employ the most are small businesses. So if you impose rules upon the big companies, what ends up happening is these rules are also imposed on the smaller companies, making it more and more difficult for those smaller companies to stay in business. Companies like General Electric, they can employ 10 floors, 15, 20 floors of lawyers, tax lawyers at Rockefeller Center in New York to beat taxes. That's all their job is, figuring out ways where they can beat paying a tax. A small business owner that employs maybe 10 people, maybe employs 50 people, they don't have that luxury. They don't have the luxury of employing floor upon floor of attorney. And they can't afford those legal fees. So wanting more government and more regulation on companies like Goldman Sachs or General Electric or companies like that will not be fair if you think it through to the smaller businesses. And that is the position we're in. You got to have a goal. And it's a goal that's realistic. Organizers of Occupy Wall Street also support President Obama. And many are calling for his reelection. Yet President Obama is the ultimate insider of Wall Street. Much of his campaign funding in 2008, Wall Street. And think about the Wall Street insiders, i.e. Timothy Geithner, that work for this administration. That's how murky this issue is. There's no clear answer. As I pointed out on my Saturday show, when people want to pull the ultra left or the ultra right argument, I'm like, they're both, none of them are working for you. And I think since 2008, more and more people tend to realize that. 513-749-7000, 1-800-THE-BIG-1, pound 700 on AT&T. I'm Darryl Parks on the big one, 700 WLW. 700 WLW. Darryl Parks in for Doc Thompson. He's back tomorrow, 9:06. Boy. Join me on Facebook. Facebook.com/Darryl Parks. Got comments on the Occupy Wall Street thing going on and the Occupy Cincinnati rally this weekend. Also, Michael Jackson sycophants. And the Ohio State Buckeyes still in denial. And I know those that are familiar with my show would say, Darryl, you cannot let this opportunity go by. Oh, no. Oh, no. I will not let the latest suspensions of Ohio State Buckeye players go by. We'll get to that later on this morning. Also, 11:06 this morning, a guest from the website justice4MJ.com. And she's a sycophant of one dead Michael Jackson. 513-749-7000 is our number here. Let's head first of all to Greg, who is in Cincinnati. 700 WLW. Hey, Greg.
Hey, Darryl, how are you?
Doing good.
Listen, I listened to your comments before the break, and I couldn't agree with you more, but I want to elaborate on one point, a very poignant point that you made about how murky this situation is. Well, it is so murky that most people can't get their head around what to do about it, and that's why I'm saying that maybe it's okay to stand in front of a bridge or to stand down by the river and say there's a problem, but we don't know what the solution is, because I can draw a clear distinction between a General Electric's problems and a Goldman Sachs problems, because there is a mountain of difference between an investment bank and a company that this country depends on. So,
right, but General Electric is also an investment company.
Well, to a point,
that's part of
absolutely.
they have a lot of different businesses. One of them being a bank.
Absolutely,
right.
and I get that, and we also can't ignore that everything we do, everything this country's about, is tied to everyone else in the world. That's why our stock market went down yesterday, because based on news from Greece, which we long way away, but it still ties into it. The fact of the matter is, we don't know what to do. You know, one voice, one vote, it should mean something. But, Darryl, you got to agree with me that these days...
well, you see what ends up happening, Greg? Let me jump in there. Part of the issue is that we still have people that call talk shows. We still have radio talk show hosts that will still side with the left or side with the right, and that the right, the conservatives are right, or the liberals are right, or the Republicans or the Democrats are right.
Agreed.
And the problem we live in today, and it goes back to my murky comment, is they're both the same. And all they're doing is, whether they're Democrat or Republican, they're elitists. All right.
Well, the
elitists are ruling you and me. And all they care about is retaining their wealth and power. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. And the biggest example I could give is that faux debate that went on for nothing more than political reasons last summer with the debt ceiling. For what? It ultimately was going to be raised. They walked up, from my view, they walked up to the edge of the economy and peered over the cliff and said, okay, who's going to jump first?
I would completely agree.
Yeah.
The one thing that I would just like to emphasize is something that struck me from that young man's dialogue, was that he emphasized the fact that he had people in front of him at that meeting from every political spectrum and every social spectrum. And my only hope is that there are people from one side of extreme to the other that are so sick of those elitists that they're disenfranchised and they're looking for another place to go. And finally, we can all get together and say, yeah, there's a problem, but we don't know the answer, but it needs to be fixed, and at least to get a dialogue started that's not going to start in Washington to go to another dead-end street of that debt ceiling conversation that you just talked about.
Yeah. Well, Greg, let me read off a list. This was posted on the OccupyWallStreet.org website as far as the list of demands, because they have some specifics now. Demand number one, restore a living wage. And it goes on to say another policy that must be instituted is raise the minimum wage to, you ready for this? You ready?
I'm ready.
$20 an hour.
Okay.
Demand number 4, I'm just going to jump around here. Demand number 4, free college education.
No, obviously.
Well,
obviously.
That's why when you interview...
Obviously, I'm not calling you to talk to you to take up for those folks.
No, I understand. But to my point in interviewing Nathan earlier this hour, my point being is you can see why when people are questioned from the organization, they're evasive and they're nebulous as far as their goals.
Well, the people that are saying that those are their goals should be evasive because there's no way to make that reality. I'm
Correct.
just saying that there are problems in this country that need to be fixed, and bailing out investment banks while people are losing their homes isn't going to get it done. And I agree with you 100% that there is responsibility to that person that signs the paper.
Yeah.
But
Greg, it is not my. I have made this point over the years. I said, look, it's not my point, nor not my position, nor is it your position or responsibility to pay the mortgage of the individual living next door to you, and that's because of their irresponsible behavior. And when you get right down to, I knew what I have owned. Let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 homes in my life, and each time when I sat down at the bank or the closing agency, I knew what I was signing. There were times I had lawyers sitting next to me. I knew what I was signing. And part of the problem that happened over the years, and from the 1990s through the collapse of the real estate market, it was selling fantasy. Hey, look, you could afford a $500,000 house. I know you make $40,000 a year, but you can afford it. And unfortunately, people not having skin in the game too, which is a big, big issue. But I mean, think about the question you never answer when you go to buy a vehicle and go to buy a car. You know what that is? When they ask you, how much could you afford a month? Because when you answer that question, they'll sell you a Mercedes-Benz at that monthly cost. That's my tip for today. My consumer tip. It's 18 in front of 10. I'm Darryl Parks, 700 WL. Somebody sent me an email. What about the people camping out to vote? Oh, I'll get to that. Let me preface it by saying, get a job. Good Lord. 14 in front of 10, 700 WLW, and Darryl Parks in for Doc Thompson. Hey, Rich, you're on the big one.
Hey,
Were you out there sleeping overnight to vote?
I have work to do.
Yeah.
Some of us have jobs. Of course, I think that's what they're doing is they're camping out to vote so that maybe somebody will drop a job in their lap.
Well, no, it's about to make a point about SB 5.
Yeah, well, it's all that since you brought that up, it kind of ties in with this rioting at the fascinating interview you had with Nathan. I've been thinking about it now for the last half hour, and we forget there's people like that out there that I guess they forget that this is a republic, and they look at the politicians as oppositions to them, as somebody who is standing in the way of them getting something, and they're supposed to be the representatives. If they actually participated correctly, as their representative, it might work better.
Well, Rich, I'll disagree with you there because I am one that believes that the ruling class, whether it's Congress, whether it's the Senate, no matter who the person is, they just live in a whole different world. And they don't live in our world. They don't live in the world where it's about. Look, you and I have talked many times about taxes.
Yeah.
You and I have talked many times about school taxes and school levies. And the truth is, people that are on school boards or people that are superintendents in school systems, they're not living in the real world. All they're worried about is spending $1 more than they have in the budget, and then the next year they go back to the voters and, hey, look we want only another $150 per 100,000 in your assessed valuation, which works out to big bucks. There was an article, a letter to the editor in the paper, I think it was on Saturday, some woman saying that she just moved here, unfamiliar with school levies, but is $24 a month. Too much to ask. And I believe it was in your school system at Lakota.
Probably was.
And you know what? Yeah, it is too much when they're abusing the money that they have.
Yeah. 24 here, 24 there, 24 everywhere. It adds up to hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And the thing is, you're right about the political class, but we allow that political class to be created when we don't participate in it, when you don't go to school board meetings or when you don't call your congressman up or you use a union or a union lobbyist to do it behind the scenes. You've got to do it directly. You have to participate or the ruling class will take off and get out of hand. And that's where this Yeah, that's the root of the problem, I suppose. And to assume that we're a democracy where everybody has equal say, and the world that the world can somehow support $20 an hour for a minimum wage. I was recently at an Issue 2 thing where I listened to a lot of the union people, and the arguments that they had was all about because I'm supporting Issue 2 for the school levy issues, just to get some of these costs under control. But their things was all about what's in it for me, what's the my what's going to be my deduction for my health care, and the conversation can't even get out of that range to the larger issues about, well, should somebody be allowed to strike, or should there be binding arbitration? You can't even get to that level because it's all about this focus on these small little issues, and it's really discouraging.
Well, when you look at the politicians, they'll focus on things that have no meaning in anything. While the economy is that's their job. When they're elected to office, no matter what level of government it is, their job is to be fiscally responsible with the tax dollars we send them.
Yeah.
It's to be fiscally responsible currently, and it's also to make wise and intelligent decisions for future planning. Is that happening?
No, absolutely
All right.
not.
Hey, let's go back to our good friends at Occupy Wall Street. I got this off their website, occupywallstreet.org. Here's Demand 11. You ready for this one, Rich?
Throw it at me.
All right. Immediate across-the-board debt forgiveness for all debt. Debt forgiveness of sovereign debt, commercial loans, home mortgages, home equity loans, credit card debt, student loans, and personal loans. All debts must be stricken from the books. World Bank loans to all nations, bank-to-bank debt, and all bonds and margin call debt in the stock market, including all derivatives and credit default swaps. All $65 trillion of them must be stricken from the books. And they go on to say, and I don't mean debt that is in default. I mean all debt on the entire planet, period.
Oh, my goodness. Are you sure you're not getting that off Comedy Central's website?
No, I'm not. I'm not making this up. I mean, it does sound like something I'd write, but no, I'm not making it up.
Oh, my goodness. I don't even know what
So
to
what
say
does that do? That rewards poor behavior, right?
Yeah.
All right, Rich, have a great day, buddy. We'll see you. 9 in front of 10. I'm Darryl Parks, 700 WL. Doc Thompson off today. He'll be back tomorrow. I'm Darryl Parks. Mark writes on my Facebook page. He says, Darryl, listen, the behind-the-scenes point of the protest. People are sick of being ignored by elected officials. It's the 60s all over again. There is a thing called a 40-year, if I have time later on this morning, I'll explain it, a 40-year generational cycle. He says, example, West Claremont Schools went over our heads to build 2 elementary schools. By the way, very nice schools in that district. Very nice, very much a palace. Went over our heads to build 2 elementary schools that are over the top and not affordable. Streetcar. Mayor Mallory is hell-bent on doing it. The people want it, he says. No, they don't, says Mark. People are sick of it all. Yeah, Mark, I agree with you. I really do. Friend me on Facebook, facebook.com and / Darryl Parks. LB, you're on the big one.
Yeah, Darryl, I'm first-time caller.
Glad you called.
I want to call just to express, listening to watch your program here. I haven't picked up all of it, didn't hear the interview, but you hear so much of this. Let's tax those rich people. And I don't begrudge Mr. Linder and his family a dime of what they've earned. When you consider the thousands of jobs that they have produced that are good-paying jobs with benefits that a lot of people are enjoying today because of their ability to build the companies they built. And, when you declare who's rich and who isn't, if I'm making $30,000 a year and you're making $100,000 a year, you're rich to me.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to give me part of your money so I can raise my standard of living at your expense. And listening to some of these demands, I don't know what planet these people lived on, but I'm 65 years old. I grew up in the 60s. I was in Vietnam. I came home to the so-called hippie bunch that called us names when we come back. And those people didn't have a clue, and it sounds like these people don't have a clue either, except I want to live high on the hog and let somebody else support me. That's my opinion of the whole thing.
Yeah, LB, I think the focus is in the wrong spot. What's ended up happening in our communities, our societies, is that the vast majority of people now get more from government than they put in. To me,
Yes, sir.
we could all complain and bitch and moan about taxes. To me, look, taxes are our cost of living in our communities. And I have no problem with that. What bothers me is when the tax money is wasted. That bothers me. All right,
Well,
but I
that's
have
the
no
thing.
problem paying taxes, and my feeling is everyone should pay taxes. Flat
Well,
tax
that's
it,
what
no deductions, no deduction for
Right.
for your tax or for your mortgage on your house. Flat tax it. You make $100,000 a year, you pay 10. Send in $10,000. Thank you very much. We'll move on. That's fair. And if everyone, no matter what level you are as far as your income, that's fair. That's the cost of living in our communities, and it has to be fair. And this pointing at the rich and saying, well, those people they're rich. Well, to Albie's point there with Lindner, I mean, did he make investments? Did he make risks, and did he take risks to build his businesses? Yeah. Small business owners do the same thing. And the people that may not have an entrepreneurial spirit, and I'll point fingers at myself here. I mean, to me, I'm so conservative when it comes to risk, when it comes to finances. I mean, I'm so conservative. I don't have any of those genes in me. But people like Lindner and the people that are wealthy should be learned from, not ostracized. They have so much to teach us. All right, coming up at 10:06, Greg Stebbins going to join us, who's our tech guy here at the Big One. The iPhone 5, or is it the iPhone 4S? Details on that are going to be released today. Do we really need one? Greg will tell us coming up on the home of the best Bengals coverage, 700 W.